reading, not after I was like, I read The Hobbit and liked it. And then I was reading Lord of the Rings, and it was so dry and detailed that I think at a certain point I thought, if I'm going to learn all this fictional history, I think I would rather learn history of the real world.
Oh, it's your origin story.
I think it really is. I think that I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn like kings and queens. I want them to be the actual ones, not some made up fairy kings and queens.
Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions shape our identity and our lives. I'm your host, Pam Schaefer, and our producer is Laura Studeris. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can head over to our Patreon to support us directly and get transcripts of all of our episodes, or you can come hang out with us on your favorite social media platforms, where we can be found under WNB the podcast. For this episode, we were joined by writers Dana Schwartz and Korama Danquah. For the record, they are two of the funniest human beings that I know. I hope that you enjoy our chat. See the creepy robot recording in progress voice.
She's very soothing to me.
Right? Right. It's the sound of Zoom is working instead of randomly restarting itself. That's a fun one. I love that for me. That happens to me once a week. I don't know if it happens to you both, but it's like my Zoom will just be like, it's time to update. Boom. And I'm like, no, oh God. Like, yeah, it's out of nowhere.
Mine doesn't quite do that, but sometimes it's like, there's a bad connection. I'm just gonna pop you out for a second and pop you back in.
Just for funsies.
Mm-hmm.
Just, just as a delight. So you both were recording podcasts today earlier, right?
That ended up not happening because of me. I'm still in the desert. I'm at my mom's. It's a whole thing.
Amazing.
She's not here, which is why I was on the phone with her. So, yeah.
Tell everybody that will be listening, what is the podcast that hypothetically you are going to record in the near future then?
It is a podcast called Rain on Me, which is through the Noble Blood Patreon, where Korama and I go through every episode of the CW television show Rain about Mary Queen of Scots.
CW masterpiece.
Masterpiece, yeah.
So Dana is the one that knows about history, and I'm the one that knows about the CW. So.
It's true. We're a perfect match.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
I think every relationship should have one person that knows about history and one person that knows about the CW.
Yeah.
There we go. I need to find my CW mate, because I joke that like with my podcast, like my producer brings the calendar and I bring the chaos. Mm-hmm, so it's like, you've got to have.
Yeah.
I was just like, does that make history the calendar? Does Dana bring the calendar?
Yeah, I bring the calendar. The historical calendar.
Yes. Although we have determined, if you listen to the podcast, that it takes place in the year of, what's the year? 1535?
1530 vibes?
1552 CW. That's the year.
CW. Yeah.
So like not AD, CW. It's its own timeline.
It's a parallel universe.
There's like a Gregorian calendar. There's the Jewish calendar. There's the CW calendar.
There we go.
Different calendars.
There we go. That's amazing. And with that, I was thinking of all of like the research that goes into Noble Blood. I was like, so to do that for the CW, I was like, wait, do you then have to do like equal research for like CW and history? I'm like,
no, I don't do equal research, because I do like hundreds of pages, like every episode of Noble Blood, like I work really hard to make sure it's very accurate. And the thing about Rain is it's very inaccurate. And even though
we love that.
We love it about it, but it's like there's no real equivalent of research. I think that the best research is like when Korama comes to me and reminds me or informs me that one of the characters is played by Donald Sutherland's son, which is just like Kiefer Sutherland's half brother.
And we like speculate on what holidays they do or do not spend together as a family.
So like that's the research that we bring to Rain on Me on the Noble Blood Patreon. Noble Blood, well-researched, historically accurate. Rain, CW time.
I will say though, there is something to the fact that with Rain on Me, we are people that were alive and actively around while the show was airing. So a lot of the research that happens is around the context of the airing of the show. So like, why are they using this music?
Yeah.
We at one point said that the theme song sounded like the Lumineers, and it turned out it was indeed the Lumineers.
Indeed it was.
Really good reason.
I also think that like when we do historical research, it's a lot of like, oh, so that thing that they did in the show on this wild plane of reality actually has like a kernel of truth in things that actually happened.
Like the forks. We went into a lot of fork conversation.
Where Catherine de Medici did introduce forks to French court.
They like made a little joke about it. It's like, oh, my mother says that this is a tool of diplomacy. And it's like, yeah, it's a fork.
Actually, it was.
Yeah.
Wait, so prior were they just like stabbing and scooping, like sans fork? Is that what the maneuver was? Like what was like table etiquette prior?
Knives, hands.
God's forks.
Got it.
Well, and then using the term God's forks, one of the reasons that people were like very averse to forks for a long time is because it reminded them of the devil's pitchfork. And they were like, no, this is for hay only. Hay and the devil.
Hay and the devil. The devil is torturing people and also doing bales of hay constantly, as we all know.
What?
Farmers and Satan, the only people that are allowed forks.
I was just like, I have no follow-up questions because all of this, I'm just like, that's a great band name. That's a great band name. That's another great band name. I'm like, God's Forks. Okay, great. Farmers and Satan? Like, I want to hear, those are the people that should be writing the theme song.
God's Forks. I would listen to
The Lumineers did a great job. Love the Lumineers. Very much a 2013 choice.
Yes. There was someone called it, I don't remember the exact, it was like twangy stumpy music. Like
twang stomp.
Yes.
Twang stomp. Twang twang stomp.
Yes. Where it's like a 4 on the floor, but there's like an aggressive mandolin. And it's like that was like
got a little washboard with like a spoon. Yeah.
Yes.
It's sort of like the Irish people on the Titanic.
Yes, the Irish people on the Titanic.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a very specific time. It was right after the everybody whistling in a song time.
I think that overlapped. I think there's a Venn diagram of whistling and shouting hey in songs.
Right.
It's 2013.
That's
the diagram.
The question is like, is the band wearing hats or vests?
Ooh.
Or both?
Oh, I was gonna say the kind of like, I don't know what to call them other than like the Newsies hats.
Yeah.
There was like that thing going on. Yes.
I'm with you.
Yes, that was a specific vibe. I heard, by the way, that someone said that twee and
Indie sleaze.
Yeah, that those things were like looping back around into our cultural landscape.
Yeah, according to the children on TikTok.
The TikTokers say that it's happening, but a lot of like fat TikTokers are like, no, because remember when this happened and everyone was fat phobic?
Yeah, it's a very fat phobic aesthetic.
And then people were like, oh yeah, we didn't know that because we were little babies then. Ooh, yikes, we don't like fat phobia. But then some of them are like, I don't know, maybe I do like fat phobia.
Like, do I like fat phobia? Question mark. Though I don't know what's on your TikTok algo. I get a lot of like body neutrality, mental illness, music, animals doing silly things like, wow, did I watch a porcupine eat a biscuit last night on TikTok?
I get people dancing to Broadway musical stuff. Mostly.
I get a lot of stuff on race. What else do I get? I get a lot of stuff on Twilight. It's race and Twilight. Sometimes race in Twilight because Stephanie Meyer was Meyer? Now I can't remember what her last name is.
I feel like I blanked it out of my brain at some point.
It's Meyer. I'm going to say it's Meyer.
Myers with an S.
Fucking A.
Dana just
Can I
did a Google.
swear?
I did a Google.
You're allowed to swear.
Okay. So Stephanie Myers, I should have known because my friend Michelle Myers, who's an incredible author, she has a sister named Stephanie. So people think that she is Stephanie Myers' sister, but she's not. She's a different Stephanie Myers sister because Stephanie Myers of Twilight fame actually spells her Stephanie differently than most people spell their Stephanie. Yeah, she's Stephanie. Most people are Stephanie.
Stephanie.
Yeah, so she's got an E there. But so Stephanie Meyer is very adamant that there are no vampires of color. There are no black vampires.
Wait,
and if
there's a black vampire. There's a black vampire in Twilight.
Because Catherine Hardwicke fought really hard for that black vampire. That guy, Laurent, the character, was not black in the book.
I didn't read the books.
Well, that's your first.
Wait, so she thinks that if a black, does she think either that black people physically can't become vampires, or when they're bitten, they become white people?
When they're bitten, the venom drains the melanin out of them because it makes them pretty. It's very Mormon, actually.
Melanin and blood that's not the same. Like, you're pale because you're blood, but your melanin.
Dana, I know this.
Dana's bringing the calendar. Korama is bringing the chaos.
You're pale because it's the blood that makes your skin pink.
You don't understand. You don't understand the lore surrounding Twilight.
I don't.
Oh my God.
So in Twilight, I love that this is what we are talking about. It's like this episode of Why Not Both brought to you by Twilight. So in the lore of Twilight, venom is what turns you into a vampire. So the vampires have like venom, like they're snakes in their body. And it like courses through your body and it burns and it's awful.
Great.
So it's not about draining you. It's not about like draining you of blood. It's about filling you with venom, and the venom changes you on a cellular level. And so if you were dark skinned in life as a human, you will become at darkest olive toned as a vampire. And it's like in the illustrated guide, Stephanie Myers gets into it and talks about it. And there's a great TikToker who comes up on my For You page every single day. She's Twilight Talks, and she's a gem. I'm obsessed with her. And she loves and hates Twilight in equal measure. And it's the same way that I feel, because like Twilight is Mormon propaganda. It is 100% Mormon propaganda. And that is very much in line with Mormonism's beliefs on dark-skinned people, and like how dark skin is like a stain. It's a mark. It's the mark of Cain. It's bad. And when you go to heaven, there's nobody that is dark-skinned. And like, if you are naughty, you get your dark skin. Like, I might be screwing up some of the Mormon doctrines, but that's one of the reasons they say it's not, but they say that one of the reasons that there were no leaders of color in the Mormon church prior to like the 1970s. In the 1970s, Heavenly Father was like, oh, it's okay for blacks now. It's like, that's so interesting how that coincided with the civil rights movement in the United States. Isn't that crazy?
One more follow-up question.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Two more. One, so black people who become vampires become olive skinned. What if you're like a Latino or a Middle Eastern person who becomes a vampire?
Probably white, probably just white.
You just get like whiter, you just skew Caucasian.
You just get,
so.
She has a mental hierarchy from white to black, and you just get one notch up.
Yeah.
That's bad. People should talk about that.
Yeah, literally, I was just like, why is this not showing up on my TikTok? I mean, I liked the porcupine with the biscuit.
I will send you Twilight TikToks. I will send you so many Twilight TikToks. I get them every single day. Sorry, I hijacked this with Twilight conversation.
That is, what's interesting is occasionally I'll get like book talk stuff on mine, or there's this one amazing TikToker who actually like self-inserts into scenes in Twilight. Have you seen her? Where like,
is she black?
Yes.
And she does Jasper really well. Where she's just like, she does that face. Yes. I'm obsessed with her. I love her Jasper. She's a good Jasper. Chef's kiss. Well, okay, so have you seen Twilight enough to know why that's particularly funny?
Yes, it's like a bunch of my students were into Twilight, as was my sister. So it's like, I was like, all right, let me see like what is going on here. And I read it and just was like, I only read the first one all the way through because I was like, I've got to at least read one of them all the way through to understand what's sort of going on. And I was just like, wow, this is so actively bad.
It's very bad. Yeah.
And so I watched like part of the movies, but same thing where it's like, I was like, wow, I didn't know something could be this bad. And it was like luridly fascinating because I was just like, how do you make so many unforced errors?
It's incredible. Like that, it's its own art form. It's beautiful. I will say I tried recently to read Midnight Sun, which is the new Twilight book that came out last year, I think 2021 or 2020. And I was like, oh, this is like worse than I remember them being when I was 14. This is not like I can't tolerate how bad this book is.
Worse?
It might not be that it got worse. It might be that I am older and was in a pandemic and was sad and was like, this isn't fun right now. I'll probably come back to it.
I feel this.
What I do want to say though, is that I don't know if you remember, we're still talking about Twilight, Dana.
But thank God, because I have something to add. Keep going.
Okay. But the Jasper TikToks that you're talking about specifically with, I wish I remembered her username with that Black user.
Oh, she does the face like this?
Yes. Well, you know that Jasper finds it difficult to be a vegetarian the way that they are vegetarians in Twilight, where they don't eat people. He's the youngest. He's not the youngest vampire, but he's the newest to that lifestyle. Also, what's so funny about that particular woman doing it is that Jasper was a Civil War Confederate soldier. And
really awful.
I love that she's like taking it back. That's a common trope in vampire things. I want to do I briefly talked to Dana about it, but like, I want to do a whole podcast where I just talk about vampire media because I find it so fascinating and there's so much of it.
That's exactly when you were talking about like historical accuracy. What was funny is what popped in my head was I was like, what about the historical accuracy of vampire lore? And then I was like, wait, Pam, that implies that vampires are real. Then I was like, what if vampires are real? Then I'm like, but vampire lore is real. And it just spiraled. It spiraled in my head. So in conclusion, yes.
I wanted to bring up that Rami Malek played a vampire in one of the Twilight movies.
Yes. And his character was Egyptian. His character's name was Benjamin. Don't come for me like I don't know that Rami Malek was in Twilight, the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2. Also, you know who else was in that movie? Lee Pace. I recently watched and live tweeted watching that movie. I had a great time. In that movie? What? Lee Pace plays a patriot who loves fighting in not Civil War, but in like wars in the United States history. I don't think he fought in the Civil War. Jacob at one point in the movie asks him, like, did you fight at, I want to say it was Little Bighorn? And he was like, oh yeah, I almost got a bite out of General Custer. So like he's supposed to like be pro Native American.
Woke. That's good.
Yeah, he's like a little woke vampire who's just like, I fucking hate the British.
It's fun to like always be the vampire fighting on the good side because you kind of know you're not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Always help out the underdogs.
There's a little bit of that. Yeah, there's a little bit of that in True Blood, which Dana, you've seen like 3 episodes of, so you have not seen enough of it to get there. But like Eric Northman and Godric, his maker, I think they fought for the good guys in World War II.
That's fun. I like to think if I was a vampire and I knew I was not going to die by a bodily injury because I'm really scared of bodily injury, I would always help with the underdog. It's like how Lord Byron was like, the Turks, and then went to fight in the Turkish Ottoman War and then just died.
Yeah. That was
man.
Mistakes were made.
That happened?
Yeah, he went to fight in a war that he had nothing to do with just because he thought it was romantic, and he died of a sickness, not even in battle.
Did you do an episode on Lord Byron, or did I make that up? There was a lady.
I did an episode on Lady Caroline Lamb, who was his like most famous ex. But I might be doing a Byron episode eventually. His death is real.
Very dumb question.
Yeah.
What is Lord Byron's first name?
George.
Okay.
George.
So like,
Gordon
it's not
Byron.
Lord, and it's not Byron.
No, but he is a lord. His name is George Gordon Byron.
Mm-hmm.
See, that sounds so banal, but when you add the Lord in front of it, then you're like, yeah, I'm on board. But if you're like, yeah, this is George over here, you're like,
George Byron.
Good old George.
That's like when I found out that there was a president of the United States of America named Zachary Taylor. And I'm like, no, there wasn't. That's a member of a boy band in the 1990s. That's not a president of the United States in the like 1800s. No, it's not.
They're like, that's false. That's just false.
Somebody told me that and I was like, no, I took US history. No one has ever mentioned this to me before.
Is there an Animaniac song of the presidents? Like
I hate that there was a president named Zachary and then named Chester Arthur. I'm like,
No,
I didn't learn that there was a president named Chester Arthur until I was like 11. And I was like, it's too long that I've gone without hearing about Chester Arthur. I hate it.
I'm going to be real honest. I can probably name like 7 US presidents. That's not true. I can name more than 7, but some of them I'd be like, were you just important or were you actually president?
If I don't say this, it's going to bother me forever. He was fighting the Ottoman Empire on behalf of the Greeks. Lord
Byron was?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he was super into, because my only association with Lord Byron being goofy in that sector of the world. I like that I said goofy in the context of dying in a war of illness.
I mean, it's pretty goofy for a British guy just to be like, the Ottomans, I shall fight them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was very attached to this one specific temple of Poseidon that's like outside of Athens, where ostensibly that's where like the myth of like Theseus and Ariadne and all of that came from. But it's really freaking windy. I didn't know that. So I'm going to this temple being like, yes, like I will see like what inspired Lord Byron. No, I just like nearly got knocked into a pillar. Like I started like army crawling on the ground because unlike everybody else that just like hung back outside of the ruins like a normal person, I'm like, I'm going to go to the temple of Poseidon. No. And so like if that gives you any insight into like the things that Lord Byron was into, it's that it was extremely foolish.
Well, he knows that he looks very dramatic when he's windswept. So
Yeah.
that I imagine was his main goal.
Oh, if
Hashtag
he had, like,
soft boy.
oh yeah, if
Huge
there was,
soft
like,
boy.
a poet shirt involved, like
Mhm.
I just didn't have the right center of gravity, I think, as a short person to really experience the majesty. It was more of that, is this how I die? So but yes, that is why I was just like, of course he fought on the side of the Greeks, because he was very into that. Like even like at that site, like I remember the guide was just like, and Lord Byron loved it here. And everyone else on the tour was like, I have no idea what that means. And I was like, oh, how very silly. I'll venture out further.
Do you guys ever wonder, like, okay, so we're all doing our things, hoping to leave a mark in society. But like if in 80 to 100 years, somebody's giving a tour and they're like, this is Korama Danquah's favorite fat burger. Like I would die all over again. Like, what are the places that you feel like people will be like, this was her spot? Like, do you guys have those places? I don't know that we have those places in the same way that
No, because we don't like
Beauvoir did. You know?
We don't live in like little villages.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, Paris wasn't a little village, and they're all these like,
but they like had their little nooks in Paris. You know, they had their little corners, and they didn't have cars and planes, so it's not like they're like driving to the Gelsons.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the Gelsons near me and the Trader Joe's near me.
This is Dana's Gelsons.
And the Wanderlust in Atwater Village.
Yeah. I just had the thought, I was just like, because I just thought of Gelson's produce, and it would be like, this $10 apple. This is Dana's $10 apple. Every time I walk up to go to Gelson's, there's one on my street corner and I forget that it's there. And I'll just pop in and get like one thing. It's always like $17.
$100. Yeah. It's the closest grocery store to me. And I'm always like, oh, well, I'm just getting a tiny bit of stuff for one person. And it's always more expensive than I imagined. But it's across the street from a Trader Joe's, and the Trader Joe's is so crowded.
Yes.
Yeah. At least it's not Erewhon. I bought 3 things there once. I bought 3 things there once. It was $90. I was like, I could carry these things in my hands.
A nightmare. Impossible. No one should go in.
It is easier for me to carry the grocery items than to carry $90.
The only people who should be at an Erewhon are people who are trying to spot celebrities for Dumois.
I didn't know that Dumois existed until very recently. I was a Perez Hilton girl in high school. That was my gossip era. But I bring this up because I, as a shock to no one, have watched the new Gossip Girl. And I think it's really fascinating to see how they've translated original Gossip Girl, which I will say was more of a Perez Hilton style site, to
Yes.
new Gossip Girl, which is more of a Demois style, like Instagram. And just like society is changing right in front of us. And it's weird to like juxtapose two things, one that is now and one that is then, and be like, oh yeah, this seemed really cool and hip and on the cutting edge then. But like if a kid today watched that shit, they'd be like, oh, it's a blog.
Oh my God. I saw this tweet that was talking about how millennials all phrase their biographies the same way. And it was like avid explorer, aardvark enthusiast.
Yeah.
I saw a TikTok about that tweet. And everybody in the comments was like, wait, how am I supposed to do it? And I was like, thank you, because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Am I wrong? Do I seem old? And like, I know that I'm 30. I want to seem 30, but I don't want to seem 30 in like a shitty way, you know?
Literally, I'm just like,
yeah,
I want to be the cool mom.
I want to be a cool mom.
I don't want people to encounter me and like roll their eyes. You know what I mean?
I don't want to be chuggy.
Yeah.
I love that word so much because it sounds so horrible. Like it's such an unpleasant word to say that I'm
you
like
have to chew it in your mouth.
Yes. It viscerally feels like what it means.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Although somebody pointed out that it is like a tool of misogyny to call things chuggy. And I'm like, well, you took the fun out of it.
I know it is. Why can't male things be chuggy?
Male things can be chuggy. I'm sorry.
That's it. We need to start using chuggy as an equal opportunity tool because men do things that are embarrassing.
Nantucket red shorts that go past your knees are chuggy. End of story.
Yes. Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never understood those. It reminds me of like in Calvin and Hobbes when like he tries to wear shorts, but they're not shorts because he's too small. And and I'm just like, as a small person, I empathize with this, but also you need to make the choice. If the shorts are not shorts, you do not wear them.
Right.
We aren't going for some sort of weird culotte look. It's not it. And like I think about like what you just said where you're like, I want to be 30, but I want to be like not like that 30. And like creating media, I sometimes feel that way where like sometimes when I put out a song, I'm like, does this song scream I genuinely like Enya in a non-ironic way?
You know what? People bag on Enya, but like, do you like Lord of the Rings? If you do, then you like fucking Enya. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if Lord of the Rings is the best example to be like, yeah, cool people like Enya. But I think the Lord of the Rings is, very popular even amongst people who aren't, say, like Stephen Colbert, who's very into Lord of the Rings.
Like at a certain point, I remember reading, not after I was like, I read The Hobbit and liked it. And then I was reading Lord of the Rings and it was so dry and detailed that I think at a certain point I thought, if I'm going to learn all this fictional history, I think I would rather learn history of the real world.
Oh, it's your origin story.
I think it really is. I think that I'm like, I'm going to learn like kings and queens. I want them to be the actual ones, not some made up fairy kings and queens.
I read Lord of the Rings and I was like, there's too many plants in this. I don't fuck with this. Every like 5 minutes, he's like, and then they walked by a shrub and the shrub was shrubby and it looked like a shrub and it shrub.
That was my problem actually with trying to read Game of Thrones was a description of everything that everybody ate in such detail that I was like, how many ways can you describe a roast chicken, my dude?
I do freaking love when people describe food in books though. Hit me with some of those Redwall feasts, that Twitter account that's just a Redwall feast bot.
Oh my God.
I love it.
And I love that Korama, you accurately pointed out, like, is this Dana's origin story? Mm-hmm. Because how did you pick the lane of this is the lane that I want to be in? Was that the lane when you were just looking? No,
I don't think I made a conscious choice of like, this is my lane now. I think my choice of like finding my niche was like, what are the things that I genuinely like and want to talk about? And so that's how I picked, that's how I pitched Noble Blood. I was like, what's the history A, I'm knowledgeable about, and B, like gravitate towards. And it was mostly like, at first it was like French and British history. And then I've expanded that and been like very fascinated to learn more about like history from all over the world. And I think it only became my niche because I was like, oh, I genuinely like this and would want to talk about it. And obviously, even though it's like a job and it's hard and like some days I don't want to do it, more often than not, it's something I'm interested in and about.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because like people are like, oh, so you work in media for your job, so you just like live on clouds and good feelings and that's it, and you're just like,
no.
It becomes a job. It like, that's also the thing. It's like, people also think, I'm sure, like writing, you're like, oh, you're a writer, what a fun job. And it's like, no, like when you sit down at your desk, like it's still a freaking job. I'd rather just like scroll on Twitter and watch TV.
There are days where I would rather put forks into my eyeballs than write a single word.
I fully agree. Well said.
Yeah,
not even a god fork, or like, you know, like a fork.
A fork, a tool of diplomacy, just straight in my eyeball.
Like it's a hay bale.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The devil's forks straight into my ocular something.
Yeah, we got you.
Mm-hmm. This is why I would rather stick the fork, because you have to sit and think, what's the word after ocular? And you can't move on until you get the word after ocular.
I'm like, orbital? Is it the ocular orbital? But I was like, no, maybe that's just alliterative, Pam. But yeah,
I'll say what's great about sometimes being a sitcom writer is that sometimes when I'm writing and I'm like, I know a joke goes here, I don't have the joke yet. I'm just going to write the word joke all in caps.
Yeah,
and come
TK,
back to it.
Joke TK.
Joke TK. Yep. Do you know about that, Pam? The TK thing?
I like that my brain is like going, thus known.
No, there are just no English words where the letters T and K appear next to each other. So if you're doing a search and find, you can search TK and you're never going to find another word that's supposed to be like, that's just the word jiktika. You know?
I didn't know that was the origin of that. That's really smart.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is really smart, because my brain was like, oh, is it to come next? But like you
in my head, I always say to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. As you can see, like that clearly blew my mind. That is now my fact of the day that I'm like, did you know?
I'm not just a pretty face who knows about Twilight.
Amazing. And like, I guess I am curious about like, what's the difference between when you're like in a writer's room or working on sitcoms versus like, say, what you're doing for the podcast, like things like that, like, because I am making things, but they're different makings of things and different collaborations of things. So it's a very open-ended question of like, hey, speak to the different things.
Well, I think that I can't speak as much to the podcast because in terms of Rain on Me, we're together. We watch separately, but like, and I'll do a little bit of research, especially because I don't know the history as much. So I'm like, is this dude real? Is this guy real? He's never real.
Usually
never
not
a real person.
Never real.
Like, is this Portuguese prince who's evil real? Nope, he's not. And it's like, oh, his name will be lost to history. And I'm like, yeah, because it was never known to history.
But wouldn't it be fun if it was real?
One day, I swear, one day there will be a person, I'll be like, shit, that dude's real. Oh my God.
I mean,
like,
I will say Nostradamus sounds like a guy who shouldn't be real, and he was real.
That's
Doesn't
true.
Nostradamus sound like a mythical?
Yes.
People are like, the predictions of Nostradamus. It's like, no, he was a real guy writing shit down.
Yeah. I love Nostradamus.
Oh, nasty.
We call him Old Nasty, my boyfriend, on the podcast because I'm obsessed with Rossip Sutherland.
Karama wishes she was like, getting nasty.
Yeah, I wish I was getting nasty with Nasty. He has this voice. He sounds like this, and he makes predictions. And if you marry, then it will be your end. That's a really good Nostradamus.
Like, honestly, dead on.
It's like if Batman and Yoda were like blah 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 blah.
Yeah, he's a sexy Batman Yoda baby.
And also, like, I know this is really nerdy, but I always like that Nostradamus sounds like Knossos. And I'm like, that's funny. That's funny to me. That's probably funny to like 0 people, except for me.
But it's funny to you, and you hold on to that.
Really funny to me, because I'm just like, but it means only I find this very funny every time his name comes up. And I'm just like, private laugh, Pam, private laugh.
I will say the Nostradamus thing does bring up, I think it's interesting that we translate names. Like, who the fuck gave us permission to do that? Why do we do that? Yeah. Like, Christopher Columbus is not Christopher Columbus's name.
What's his? I love how I'm like, can we speak his?
Wait, I'm like, yeah, wait, say more.
His name is like Cristobal Colon or something like that. Like, Christopher Columbus is just not his name. We were like, this sounds English enough.
Yeah, we just made it American sounding.
Yeah, we anglicized it. But to answer your original question about the difference between a writer's room and sort of more isolated stuff, it does feel more isolating. Like I love that I recently just watched a cut of my season 2 episode of iCarly, and I'm like, oh, that was so-and-so's joke. That was so-and-so's joke. And like, it's my episode, but it's all of our episode. And there are other episodes where I have a joke where I'm like, I remember coming up with that. And it's nice to have this sort of like quilt of jokes and quilt of plot that we all came up with together. And I know that that's also a very multicam. Dana has more experience with like single cam.
Yeah.
And like when you told me that you just kind of like wrote your thing and then brought it back, I was like, what do you mean? And like we do a rewrite room together and we're like clickety clacking all together and it's like up on the screen and it's very collective.
Yeah, mine is very individual. I mean, my limited experiences, but are more like, all right, go write your episode and bring it back.
Wow.
And we do that too. It's like you go write the writer's draft and then you bring back the writer's draft and everybody edits it together before you send it to the studio.
I was going to say that's fascinating to hear like the different points of view, even of writing on shows, because that is a field that I'm not familiar with. And I think that a lot of people perceive TV writing as like sorcery, because it is, but also like mysterious sorcery. Like Dana, what's that like when you're, tasked with writing an episode and it's like, here you go.
It's also very different. I mean, my She-Hulk was a little different than Beauty and the Beast, the prequel that I'm writing. With this one, it was like we all in the room make the full arc of the season and then like outline the episode in terms of like exactly what's going to happen. But like mine is like the details of what people say, but like the big beats of like what happens.
Yeah.
And then I go off and write it for a few weeks and bring it back and then have a meeting with the showrunners and they tell me all the changes to make and I do it.
That's wild to me.
Yeah, I was just like, this blows my mind. Like I was reading Shonda Rhimes' book, right?
It's like the year of yes.
The Year of Yes.
Yes.
And like, I love how she put it that it's like writing for TV. It's kind of like laying train track because then the train has to, go on the track. But in my mind, like part of it is like, okay, like having that inherent storyline already there, my brain would be like, all right, cool. I'm just filling it in. But also like what, is it ever paralyzing to be like, I have to do this in this certain way because the train's going to run over it and it must have track?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. I'm so sorry, but also
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Because when I was reading that, like she said that it's like a thrill and it keeps her inspired. And I'm like, that would make me probably just turn into like a potato rotating in a microwave, just like.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword because on a certain level, like we have this outline, like we've all agreed on this outline. The studio was like, yes, you can do this. This is good. And then I'm like, great. I know exactly what I have to do. And then I'm like, this is exactly what I have to do. Oh my God. How do I make these exact things happen in 30 minutes? Well, really 22.
That's a big one. Like always going over the episode thing. And then sometimes you discuss things in the room for a long time. And then when you're actually writing them, you're like, oh, wait, this doesn't work the way we thought it would work.
Right.
And you have to like change certain things and be like, okay, I'm going to explain why that didn't work. And I need to make these tweaks.
Oh my God. Yeah. And then I'd imagine everyone has to kind of like agree about those tweaks because they probably would like butterfly effect onto other things that happen later.
Well, the boss has to agree. That's, I think, a important thing about television writing. And I think any creative endeavor really is it's subjective, right? So it kind of at the end of the day, you need someone who's like this one instead of this one, or there's no, it's not like math. It's not like you can do it collectively and get the right answer. Sometimes you do need like one person to be like, okay, we're going to go with this one.
Right. Yeah, and if you have two showrunners, sometimes they will not agree on which one. And they're like, we're going to talk about it and get back to you. Yeah. And it's never like a bad disagreement, but it's just, it's very subjective.
Yeah.
Because ultimately someone has to have the vision. I mean, like thinking about like Dana, like the book you just wrote, like you get to be your showrunner. It's like your vision for it.
I am the showrunner indeed. Yeah. And then my editor.
Yeah. And
deals with deals with the details, but yes, basically I'm the showrunner.
No, consequences. I like that one.
I love consequences there.
Yeah, I was thinking consequences, and I'm like, that's a negative word, but I do mean it. There are consequences.
There are
for my bad decisions. All of my bad decisions have consequences.
Oh my God. As my own editor, I feel this in my soul, both of podcasts and music. Sometimes I'm like, where was I going with 70 layers of whale sounds? It seemed like a good idea at the time.
I think it sounds like a good idea now.
I want to hear it. I want to hear these whale sounds.
Oh, it's fun. I now put a whale sound in every song I make just to annoy my mixer.
Love that.
Because he started.
I found out. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, he just thought it was a funny production choice on one song, and I have taken the joke too far at this point, but I can't.
That's hilarious.
Go on.
Oh, I found out from like Song Exploder that in the song Sober by Lorde, there's like a lion roar in there, or a tiger. I think it's a tiger. There's like a big cat roaring and it's like, roar. And I was like, I didn't even notice. But then once I found out, I was like, oh, I hear it.
I think this was just an interview that Phineas gave about Bad Guy, that like the parking, what's it like waiting for
the crosswalk thing in Australia.
In Australia is in the Bad Guy, which I think is very
can't
funny.
Unhear it.
Yes. I remember hearing that episode because Phineas is like, his production work is just stunning. Like that was, I remember when I first heard her work, I was just like, oh my God, like just all of this. And I was like, who's the producer? Because I'm a big nerd. And then when I started looking up his stuff, I was like, oh my God. And then like hearing him, he's like, yeah, so I started doing this when I was like 12. And I was like, yeah, I'm just like, cool. I was sitting in trees writing in my journal.
Yeah, he's like fully a prodigy.
Yeah. I was like, okay, cool.
I don't even know what I was doing when I was 12. I wasn't reading Twilight yet. Honestly, it's just before Twilight and after Twilight, and before Twilight's a blur.
Where is that on like the CW calendar? Is that like year like 412 CW? Like...
Well, the CW has only existed for 15 years. So technically, my pre-Twilight life is all pre-CW.
Like BCW?
Yes, BCW.
I was like, it's fascinating. Also, like what popped in my brain was like making media that we end up consuming at different ages than the people who created it. Like I think about like what I was like, for instance, even like listening to when I was 12. And I definitely remember there was like a changeover when I started listening to like, I guess what one would call like cool music. Like before I was like, I'm going to listen to like Simon and Garfunkel and show tunes and Chopin and Leonard Cohen.
That sounds cool to me.
I was a really cool kid that clearly got along with my peers.
You were the DJ at all the parties.
Oh yeah, I was like, you want to hear a made up love song to Emily Dickinson? Because I got you. You want to hear some nocturnes? Like, so yeah, I'm just like, that was fine. That was totally fine. But like, there's a changeover when I started listening to stuff that was like, okay, I'm going to listen to this as a teenager. And I was thinking of this, Dana, because I know that your book is like at #1 for young adult. And I'm thinking, I'm like, one, and two, I realized the things I liked were being produced by people who are like our age now. It's like a lot of the stuff I was reading or listening to is made by women that were at least in like their 30s, maybe their 40s, like. And I'm like, that's fascinating. And I'm like, because when I'm creating stuff, I'm not thinking about like, is this for like a teen market or an adult market? Like, I'm not thinking about that.
I always find it very weird to think about how sometimes art has been created by people younger than me. And I'm enjoying it. Like, that's even weirder for me. But like Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein when she was 18 and 19, and you're like,
nope, didn't happen.
Yeah. So that's the wild thing for me is like, it makes sense to me, and it's logical in the order of the universe that people older than me would make things that I consume. When people younger than me make things that I consume, it fucks up my brain.
Yeah.
It's very much a mind fuck. I was like, should I buy makeup earlier today? And I decided no. But I was also thinking about how much the cosmetics industry has changed just in like my adulthood. And it's because of Fenty. It's because of Rihanna and because of Fenty. And because she released 40 foundation shades at the onset of her brand. And I was like, how long ago was that even? And it was 2017. And I was like, how old was Rihanna when she did that? 29 years old when she revolutionized cosmetics.
I don't like that. I don't like anyone doing anything important when they're young.
I mean, but it is good because the young people push the things forward. But also, I'm just like, damn, girl. But like, it also made me remember how young Rihanna was when she started making music. Because if you think
she was
about
like 16.
Yeah,
she was like 16.
Yeah, she was like 15 or 16. I love how distressed you are, Dana. You're just like,
well, here's the
You
thing.
look like you're gonna throw up.
I'm like, Korama, yes, it's good that young people are moving things forward in the world and progressing the world. But on the other hand, the thing that you didn't bring up is it makes me feel bad. So I just feel like we need to weigh those two things.
right. We have
global progress,
here.
me feeling bad.
That is possibly the whitest thing I've ever heard you say.
That was amazing on like every level. I was like, I'm just witnessing this. I'm staring through time witnessing.
But no, I know what you mean. Cause I just like, I mean, she's a lot. But sometimes I think about Azalea Banks. Because the generous thing to say is just she's a lot. And that's all I'll say on her personal whatever. But like when she released 212, I was in college and I was like, who is this cool older lady? And I'm like, she's a month younger than me. We're the same age.
Yeah.
She was born in like May of like the year that we were born. She has an EP called it 1991. Now everybody knows how old I am. And I was born in April of 1991. And I'm just like, oh, this is now the point where people my age are like doing really cool things. And like, these are my peers. And even just like in college, there was a dude that we went to school with who played Coachella while he was in school.
Wait, who?
Nico Jar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And also Emma Watson was making Harry Potter while she was in college with us. But that was a little different because she had started earlier. But I'm just like, right.
Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, and Janis Joplin were dead at 27. Kurt Cobain died at 20. Like, I know the 27 Club is like now thing, but like 27 is young.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you really wanted to die at 27, you should have just called me. I would have done you a favor.
Like it's all over now. No, it's so weird. Like I've been talking to different creators about this over the course of, by the way, if you had told me like that over 2 years, I would talk to over 100 people from my living room about like making stuff and like losing their minds during a pandemic, I'd be like, what? And then it would be like, and people will listen to these conversations. I'm like, why? Like, why would literally any of this happen? But it's fascinating because I learned as like an eternal like bog witch gremlin that like I'm like, oh yes, I con people into thinking I'm young. I am not. I'm just small. Like, but I learned that like how much perception changes when you're older. But I did learn also you only grow in power. It's like your field of fucks becomes increasingly fallow. So especially talking to like older female artists, now I'm just like, oh, I am excited about this. It's like they have this like, I don't know how to describe it other than this like deep inner power where you're just like, I don't want to mess with you. I just want to be you.
You can just say Tori Amos. It's okay.
Oh my God. That interview made my life. I think 15-year-old me retroactively passed on to another plane of existence. But like speaking to like Melissa Oftemauer of Hole, who like, by the way, she started like touring when she was like 20. Like that's the thing, same thing where it's like right off the bat, she like totally like hit like quote success, but then like she opened an art center, which she totally wasn't expecting to do. And like all this different stuff. And it's like hearing these women that just like move through their lives that like, even if they found like early quote success.
Yeah.
Like, cause Tori, I mean, she had so many not successes before she had success. And like hearing how she, you know, talks about all the work that she put into it. And like, by the way, it was like seriously one of the biggest honors of my life to like thank her for that, like on the part of like all the female musicians that came after her for that reason. But it's like hearing that it's like a lot of these people either had success and then kind of had a dip and then like kind of a rise, or that it was like nothing. Like it kind of gave me this feeling of like, oh, cool. Okay. Not only do I got this, but like, it actually gets better the older you get because you just do stuff you like and you care less about what other people are on board for or not, which ironically usually actually draws people to your stuff.
Yeah.
I was like,
which Tori Amos, it's so funny because I was like, I don't know what I was doing when I was 12. I was listening to Tori Amos.
Yeah.
I was listening to Little Earthquakes over and over and over and over and over again. To the point where I still have my diaries from like 12 to 16. Like those were my prime diary writing years. And I would like write little quotes in my diary. And I love like when I have friends over, it's in a box somewhere now, but like I would be like, let's read a page from my diary. It'll be funny. And it's like, I want to die. They are all and my friends are like, I'm concerned. It's like, I'm still here, it's fine. But I would like put a quote from a song, and like for years they were all, I just read like 6 random ones, and they were all Tori Amos.
Amazing.
And my friend Becca was like, you listen to a lot more Tori Amos than I would have pegged you for.
Yeah. If you had asked me whether I thought you were a big Tori Amos fan, I would not have thought so.
Part of it also is that like my mom was a big Tori Amos fan.
Sure.
So like in the early 90s, I'm listening
sense.
to like Little Earthquakes. My mom was listening to like Sinead O'Connor. She was listening to Alanis Morissette. She was listening to Tori Amos.
Yeah.
And so like I grew up listening to those. So I'm like, Jagged Little Pill is my jam. And Little Earthquakes like would help me sleep still sometimes. I'm just like, yeah, I'm gonna listen to Winter. I think that's the song, the one that's like so I'm gonna cry. But
I was like, we're gonna cry. Don't go there, Korama.
But like I know I talked about like our spots and stuff with like, oh, Korama's favorite fat burger, Dana's Gelson's, and all of that. But like I think that it's cool to see the influence that these people and these like living legends have had on us too, because like I am here today because of Tori Amos. Like literally alive because of her.
Yeah, like it's interesting that almost like instead of having like temporal spaces, I at least have like almost like touchstones of like certain albums, certain books, certain things like that. I mean, I guess you could be like, this is the sometimes bog in Griffith Park that Pam likes, that sometimes it's just a tangle of brambles, and then when it rains, it's a bog. I don't know why.
I also think it's kind of surreal to think of like some like YA books that I read as a kid, and like the not particularly famous or successful ones, but the ones that like I just like found in a random Borders and read, and I'm like, oh no, this really connected with me. And it has no like, I'm sure the author has like, you know, 816 followers on Twitter, just like living a normal life the way that people do after they write books. And like, it really had like a real moment for me, and like has no cultural ramifications outside of that.
I was like, what are some pieces of your personal mythology in books and music? Now we know that Tori Amos is Korama's patron saint.
Oh, I can't think of like those specific ones, but like, I mean, my big ones are all like Ray Bradbury, and like, that's like very basic of like people, just like the books I read that like are my lodestars creatively.
Yeah. I just thought
go ahead.
Oh, it's weird because like you said, like living legends, like Francesca Leah Block's book, Dangerous Angels, like all the Weetsy Bat books.
I was a teenage fairy. That was a big one for me. And I remember
haven't read
told me that you knew Francesca Leah Block. I was like, shut up.
I don't know these books.
Oh my God, you got it. I mean, it's also very LA. It's super like LA teen girl to have read like Weetsy Bat.
Oh yeah.
I've never even heard of Weetsy Bat.
Oh my gosh, Dana, you are in for a treat. It's very much like LA mythologized through like the literary equivalent of like pink gauze and like sequins and 90s vintage dresses, and like Melrose when it was at the height of being Melrose, and just like everything in like kind of like a soft fairy tale aesthetic, but very LA. So it's like soft and gritty at the same time.
Back when Melrose still had like red balls and aardvarks.
Yeah. It's
Speaking of, it was her debut novel that she wrote when she was in college.
See?
There you go. And yeah, like that meeting Francesca was like much like meeting Tori, where it was like, I was like, how is this happening? And I think it is pretty cool, honestly, that like we do have living legends, because if I look back at like, okay, like who are people who influence me? I'm just like, oh, they're still here. I can chat with them.
Janet Fitch is my friend on Facebook. And I'm like, you're just there.
She is awesome, by the way. Like,
I know.
Low key, I met her by accident because I wrote an album based on the Diaries of Anais Nin, because see previous, wow, am I cool? And so like not obscure at all. But she was published in the same Anais Nin literary journal that I was, and we ended up at like the same party and started chatting. Same thing where it's like, now she's my Facebook friend, and I have the exact same reaction each time like Janet like pops up or she says hey, and I'm just like,
yeah, she used to do like Facebook Live things once a week, and I'm like, well, you're just here. You wrote one of the most influential books to my adolescence, and you're just my Facebook friend now, and that's cool.
Wild.
Yeah. It's interesting because like we do feel like people are accessible, and I was curious about that, Dana, because I think out of all of us, you're the most online in a way that fascinates me.
Yeah,
it's a illness. But what do you continue?
Well, I feel like, Dana, you're the most online in a way that people are accessible to you. Like people see you. I feel like I'm the most like terminally online where I'm like, I know what's happening. I know the trends.
Yeah, you know everything.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I feel like I'm very visible online.
Yeah, and I find that so interesting. Like that's what I meant by it's fascinating. I think because like I was like, because I'm older than both of you. See previous about Bog Witch. But it's like, and so I think that in some ways I'm more guarded online because it was like a different, weirdly, actually early internet felt a lot like TikTok does now, where it's like a little Wild Westy, like a little weird, a little messy. And like that's what the internet felt like, but it wasn't necessarily as much about like personal narrative. Whereas like I find it so fascinating when people are present in a personal narrative way, but that other people are drawn towards.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's interesting. I think it's honestly, I'm just like, I have a very short attention span and like external validation, and the social media like conglomerates have sort of hacked that and like understand that it's at this time and this pacing that you continually refresh a social media feed.
Wow.
So I don't think it's like a particularly healthy thing for my brain, but yeah, I like the external validation. It like makes me feel less lonely.
Oh, I just realized I was like, my lips are dry. And it was weird because Korama mentioned makeup earlier, and I was like, oh, I'm putting on Glossier, which Mara said the funniest thing to me about Glossier. She was just like, it's like makeup for people who are already pretty.
Yeah, it is. I'm not pretty enough for Glossier. I can't do it. My skin is bad.
And I was like, have I flown too close to the sun? Like, do I have the hubris? But I'm just like, no, I just really like their matte lip balm things. I was like,
I don't love makeup. And I think it took me a long time to realize that. And I feel like there are some people who, when they don't put on makeup, they feel like they are like, yeah, this is not a face I want to show the world based on the world's beauty standards. But I feel like I am blessed enough to have a face that is fine. And if I don't put on makeup, no one's like, oh my God, you left the house like that. So it is a privilege.
I've gotten very lazy with makeup. I do think I look better with makeup. Like I'm one of those people that's like, when I put a little effort in and I like put makeup on, then I look in a mirror and I'm like, oh my God, who is she? Why do I look so good today? But I can't bring myself to do it, especially now that I live with a partner. He sees me first thing when I wake up. I do not have the discipline to pull like a Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and like wake up early. So, and also I'm like not going, I like work from home. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not seeing anyone. So I'm like, this is my face now.
My MO used to be like, I will sometimes wear makeup on a night out if I feel like it. And I would wear makeup for auditions. But recently, like in 2020, I was just like, everyone's dying and I don't want to put makeup on and it's fine. And it was not initially a conscious choice, because at first when I was doing like at-home auditions, I was like, well, I'm at home. They're not going to see me like in person. I need to put on makeup. And then I really sat and thought about it. And I was like, men don't put on makeup for auditions and they still book shit. So I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo.
I'll be fine. And I have not put on makeup for an audition since, except for sometimes a lip, just because I'll be on camera and they need to see that my lips are a different part of my face.
I get that.
Yep. That's literally, that's why I put it on. It's like, that's like the most I'll do is like a tinted lip balm, because I am pale like Ghost. And one of my main things that I do when I'm concentrating, I tend to like do that with my lips. And it just makes them look paler and like I don't have a mouth. Just a ghostly thing going on. But that's fascinating what you said about like that some people like don't feel like themselves without makeup. Like one of my friends who does work from home, like is a wonderful photographer. She puts on like a full face every day because for her, that's what feels like her.
I think you get used to what you see in the mirror. Like when I have fake lashes on, like eyelash extensions, the first day I have them, I'm like, oh my God, I look like a maniac. And then like 3 days afterward, I'm like, I'm used to this. And then when I don't have eyelashes, like now I'm like looking at my face being like, oh my God, I'm a pale Victorian ghost child. But then in like 3 days, I'll get used to it. So I think also like you look in the mirror and you see your face and then you get used to that.
Well, and that's what's so insidious, I feel like, about the way that social media exists now. Because like in the Wild West days of the internet, people just looked the way that people look. But now you have all these filters and stuff. And I don't think that filters are inherently bad. I do think, though, not disclosing, hey, I am a famous person who has professional makeup artists and also uses filters and also uses like, I changed the way that my body is shaped. And then you have like little kids and they're like, oh, so-and-so so pretty. I'll never look like that. It's like, so-and-so is
so-and-so like doesn't even look like that.
$2,500 into looking like that just through apps and makeups and things like that. Like, you know, that's not how that person looks.
I almost always use an app to cover up zits, which is why I don't use makeup like I don't wear makeup day to day, but then when I want to take a selfie, I just like take it and then use an app to patch. I use the patch app. So everyone, my face is never as good as it looks in pictures. I am always covering up zits digitally.
It's very brave of you to admit. Thank you.
I know. Am I a hero? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Like I have horrible allergies. And so I perennially either look like I've been crying or like I'm stoned or like I was stoned and crying. And so the one thing I touch up, like for the most part, I must admit, I'm too lazy to touch up my face because like there are photos for like press or like, you know, music stuff where I'm clearly wearing a ton of makeup. Like, and the point is that I'm wearing a ton of makeup. But then in all my other stuff or in my stories or whatever, like this is just my face. But I will sometimes whiten my eyes because like I have had people like message me like about just lots of weed questions. And I'm like, I'm not actually a stoner. I'm allergic to trees. There's nothing wrong with being a stoner. I happen to just not be high. My body thinks that grass is a mortal threat. And so like, this is just what the vibe is today. So it's like, it's absolutely mortifying that between the ADHD and the red eyes, people are just like, oh yeah, I see what's going on here. I was like, you really don't. You are sorely mistaken, my friend. But yeah, that distortion and like that almost relates back to what I was thinking about the relatability online, where it's like we relate to the avatars that people create of themselves. And I find that fascinating. And I was like, Dana, is that the part that you don't like of it? Because you were like, I like this. I don't like this. I like this, but I don't like this.
Oh, no, I honestly think the thing I don't like about social media is just that it's addicting and takes up a lot of time. That like I do a task and then I'm like, oh, my brain is like time to check Twitter.
Yeah.
And I wish it didn't. Other than that, like I do think it like is good to be able to communicate with a bunch of people and like meet people and be in touch with people I otherwise wouldn't. But I don't like that. I think it has actively shortened my attention span and made it harder for me to focus.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I was just like, yeah, as someone who doesn't have an attention span, I'm not sure if it shortened it or if it's just congruous with my internal experience, frankly. I genuinely don't know.
I will say one of the things that I do love about social media, and like I love TikTok. That's like probably my favorite social media platform. I don't really make TikToks. I've made like 2 or 3 TikToks total. And they are bad. So I'm like, nah. But one of the things I love about TikTok is like, I'm a big fan of edutainment.
I do love TikTok for edutainment.
Yes. And like, I love that we're doing that again. Like, you know, Bill Nye the Science Guy can just like go directly to your phone, and like phones are so much more accessible now. Then I just feel like it's a net positive. And I think we talk about the negatives a lot, but net positive probably. Yeah.
I feel like we're refining as we go along to be like, which of these things are like, yay, humanity, and which of these things went, oh no, humanity, in regards to like media in general. I don't know how to put it other than that. I'm just like, that's very articulate, Pam. Yay, humanity, or oh no.
I think that's a good note to end on. Yay, humanity.
Yay or no.
Yeah. Are we giving humanity a thumbs up?
Yeah, overall, a pass.
Sideways thumbs for humanity.
A pass. Yeah.
Can we get diagonal thumbs?
I think it's a good humanity because I have 2 kitties who are very aggressively wanting to hang out, but especially when they want dinner, which is a good thing about humanity.
It's dinner time.
I was going to say, we will break for dinner time for kitties because that is vital. I was like, I don't know about your cats. I have a sometimes cat. She's my neighbor's cat who like has also chosen me, and I feel very honored.
Oh.
Yes. When she wants to come in, she has figured out the exact place to scratch on the front door behind me that sounds like a hellspawn demon because it rattles the door.
Oh, fun.
It's phenomenal. So I'm just like, you must respect when it is time for cats when they have chosen that it is the time. I'm like, oh no, I get it.
My cats like to decide an hour before that it's their dinner time, but sometimes it actually is their dinner time.
They eat at like 5, right? Though
They do.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. You have timely cats. Mine is just more a random. I don't even have snacks here. That's the thing, is she just chose me out of nowhere. Like she just decided, like, yes,
She's your
you're one of my
familiar.
people now. It's the funniest thing. Like, and I'm low key also allergic to cats and news that'll shock them.
Well, that's why you Photoshop your eyes.
Exactly. Yeah. I've gotten used to her for the most part though, and thankfully she's not a too much in your face cat. But yes, yet another reason why that is why like people are like, oh, it's the teeth whitening thing. I was like, oh no, it's the eyeball whitening tool. Like, oh my god. Well, thank you both so much for your time. I'm glad
Thank you for having us.
This was a delightful conversation.
we got to do a podcast.
Also, Korama, your hair looks really good.
Thank
It
you.
really
My mom just did
does.
it for me.
Looks phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradar.com.